Hello and welcome to our live stream. I'm Rick, this is Tim, and today we're joined by Taryn. Taryn's going to be talking about Unity visual scripting, otherwise or formerly known as Bolt. Taryn, this is a little bit of a special moment for us because up until now, GameDev.tv and the 7 or 8 year history of GameDev.tv has had a whole bunch of bald, weird-looking gentlemen as instructors, and this is fantastic because we have finally achieved our lifelong dream of having someone who is of the female persuasion as an instructor. So I'm really excited today to talk to you about visual scripting in general, and for you perhaps to dispel some of the myths out there, the people who like to type all the letters and numbers, who think that visual scripting is cheating. Tell us a little bit about it. So, as always, if anyone has any questions, please fire them our way. And we're going to start off, Taryn, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the course that you've been working on, just to give context to the conversation about Unity visual scripting.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here joining you today. And the course I've been working on is it's an introduction to visual scripting in Unity. We've designed it for beginners to Unity. So we're going to be starting right at the beginning with teaching you how to make your own very first project in Unity. And then we'll be moving on and I'll be showing you exactly what visual scripting is if you've never heard of it before. And as Rick mentioned, it's no longer called Bolt, although colloquially a lot of people still call it Bolt. It's now been integrated right into the Unity editor as Unity visual scripting. So I'll be teaching you everything there is to know about getting started with visual scripting, and all the other like basic fundamentals of making games in Unity, like making game objects and adding components and collision mechanics and player movement and all that good stuff. But we'll be doing it all through the lens of visual scripting. So with visual scripting, we won't actually be doing any C# coding whatsoever. We'll be making graphs instead, and we will be making a couple of fun little games solely using graphs. So no coding at all whatsoever in this course.
And from what I've seen, Taryn, I've played around with Unreal Blueprint more than I have played around with Unity visual scripting. And but the little bit that I've played around with and the videos of yours that I've watched, they seem really similar. And so I think a lot of what we talk about today can be applied if you're like, oh, but maybe I like Unreal and Blueprint, or maybe I like Unity. I think it applies to both engines, visual scripting. And I guess the main thing I'm wondering from you, who you've dug deep into it, is compared to working through C#, did you find, or have you found visual scripting to be quicker? If you have an idea to say, okay, drag, drop, blink, blonk, there we go. That saved me all this kind of tappity tap tap. Or is it kind of just sort of, same beast, different master, so to speak?
This is the $1 million question that everybody is always asking online: is where is the workflow easier, with coding or with visual scripting? I do think it might be a little bit faster with visual scripting. Once you get familiarity with the different nodes, you do need to sort of know what you're doing before you start dragging and dropping nodes onto the graph. And I think it's going to depend sort of on your style of programming. Like if you're somebody who feels more of an affinity with the numbers and the symbols and the typing, then coding, you might like coding better. But if you're more of a visual person, then I definitely think you should give visual scripting a try. And I do think for the beginner, I think it's a lot easier to see sort of the connections between different methods and different components when they're on the graph versus, if you have like a big script, a big C# script, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky, to follow the line of logic through if you're jumping between methods. And with visual scripting, and I'm sure it's the same in blueprints as well, in Unreal, you can really see those connections really easily.
Do you think there's room for like a hybrid type of model? Like, can you do both, or should you only stick to one?
Yeah, you can actually do both. You can use scripts, C# scripts, as well as graphs. I don't know that you would necessarily want to do that because sort of like once you have your brain in one mindset, it might be a little bit tricky to move to the other one, but you can do it.
But if somebody wanted to start with visual scripting, they're not locking themselves into a
No.
path.
No, for sure
Yeah.
not. I mean, and you can add scripts. I've been doing it myself as I've been prototyping. Sometimes I've been doing graphs and then I'm like, okay, well, let me prototype this in a script first and then translate that into a graph. And that's actually been a really fun exercise for me. So you definitely you can do both, or you could like maybe make, one part of a game with a graph and then one part with a script or whatever you want to do.
Cool.
And that's the other question I think people have is, do you get to the point where, actually typing in the C sharp, or if you're in Unreal, actually typing in the C++, you can do more things. And with visual scripting, at some point, you're not going to be able to do the things you want to do. Have you found that as you've been working your way through Unity, that at some point you're like, visual scripting is just letting me down here. I better go and actually type the thing I need to type. Or can you access all the same classes and methods and functions and parameters and variables? You can access all the same things. It's just a different way of expressing it.
Yeah, you can access all the same things. I've found that some things are easier to access with visual scripting. Things like the collision nodes, if you're doing 2D collision. I remember as a beginner being so. I think Rick, I was in your course, taking your course, and I was
Uh-oh. Well, that's
so.
not a good way to learn,
No,
Taryn. So,
I remember feeling so confused about
oh god,
what, like the on collision enter 2D, like what is this thing in the brackets? Like how do I get a hold of the object that I'm colliding with? And I think that particular example, I think is easier to see for the beginner in visual scripting. The on collision enter nodes, both 2D and 3D, I think are a little easier to understand. However, some things like, I think I was trying to get a hold of the parent of a game object or something like that. And it's easy. I mean, you can do it in visual scripting. It just takes a couple of nodes. But I was thinking, if I was coding, then all I would have to do is, put dot transform dot parent or whatever. So it definitely does require a different way of thinking. But then once you get into it, it becomes second nature.
Can I ask maybe a complicated question?
Yeah.
So I use Construct 3. It's one of my favorite prototyping tools ever. It's super visual. It's basically got a visual interface. They have JavaScript now, but they didn't have it for a while. So visual scripting was the only way. One of the hardest things I've found with Construct 3 that I don't like is how hard it is to copy like code over from projects.
Mm-hmm.
Does Unity visual scripting have a way to copy things and make it easy to kind of share between projects or anything like that?
Yeah, so one thing you can do in visual scripting is you can make subgraphs. So you can sort of encapsulate functionality, say like a basic like sprite spinning mechanic or something like that. And then you can just encapsulate that in a little graph and then call that graph up again in another graph on another game object. So it's supposed to be sort of reusing that same logic over again.
Gotcha.
Of course, you can cut and paste on graphs, which I've done sometimes as well, which is easier, I think, than cutting and pasting code. But the subgraphs are really, I think they used to call them in Bolt super units, I think is what they were called.
But graphs are like scripts, basically.
Yeah, graphs are.
Okay.
Yeah, graphs are what we use in place of scripts. They look like shader graphs. So it's a bunch of different nodes, which are little. Why can't I explain this basic concept?
Taryn, would you be able to show us?
Yeah,
Again?
for
Yeah, it's
sure.
visual scripting. I would love to.
Yeah, I know. I feel like this is again going against the grain here. Okay, so this is one of the games that we'll be making in the course, and I'm going to open up the player controller graph here.
I'm curious, anyone who's live in chat at the moment, just let us know yes or no if you've played around with Unity visual scripting, if you've had a look at it, actually got in there and moved some things around, not just glance at a screen, but have you worked with it? So, sorry, Taryn, back to you.
Yeah. So this is what a graph looks like. And these are the nodes that I've been talking about. So they're little rectangles. And they have different ports on them. So the ports are the places where you can connect other nodes to. So the ports on the left-hand side of a node are input ports, and the ports on the right-hand side of the node, there's lots of words there, are the output ports. And then you hopefully you can see the little green arrows here. This sort of follows the flow of logic through the graph. So generally in script graphs, the logic works from left to right. So you'll start with an event node, just like you would start a script with method like update or start or awake or whatnot. And then the logic flows out from there. And then you can just keep adding nodes to the graph. And you do that using a fuzzy finder. So you can just right click anywhere in the graph and then look for a node. So I was just talking about collision. So if you know the name of the node, you can just type it in. And the names are, they're non-programming names. So the names might be slightly different than what you're used to using in C# if you have familiarity with C#. So this is on.
It's good to see that on collision enter 2D is just the same, but with
Yes,
spacing, obviously.
that's why I chose that node specifically. It is actually the same. So you have the 3D and 2D version here.
You know
and
what?
then
I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine you make a lot less accidental typing mistakes. I put the semicolon in the wrong spot kind of things. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. And I never even thought about that. Yeah, there's none of that semicolon nonsense in visual scripting. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, it's really nice to, if there is a bug or an error in your code, the offending node will light up in red in your graph, and that will really, cool. Yeah, I find like debugging is really it's feels a lot more accessible in visual scripting. So yeah, so you just click on whatever node you want, and these nodes don't, but a lot of the nodes, just like snippets of code in C# will have a bunch of overloads. So you sometimes will have like a bunch of, let me see here.
Wow, you can go quick.
Yeah, and now I think it's frozen.
Are the names of stuff pretty intuitive? Because the problem with learning C#, like especially even if you know other languages, you can pick up language pretty quickly, but you don't know the syntax. You don't know the exact commands that you need to type in.
Yeah. So if you're looking for like rotate, you don't have to know exactly that. Oh, rotate is part of transform. You can just type in rotate, and then you'll see there are some different options here. And again, with the overloads. So this is what we talk a lot about in the course is like, okay, I know I want to rotate, but which of these rotate nodes do I want to use? So that's one thing that I'm trying to teach you in the course is to become comfortable choosing the correct version of the node. And it's just like with coding as well.
That's really cool. A lot of the times when I'm creating something in Unity, I'm spending half the time in the Unity docs being like, hang on, how do I write I know rotate, it's something to do with rotate, and I'm looking through all the different rotates. So to have it right there to be able to scroll through, that's really neat.
And you can see,
and you have to, this is super, super like low level detail, but you have to choose the one that has the correct overloads, the correct parameters you're putting in there, or can you kind of modify that? Because when you're doing it in C#, you type, rotate parentheses, and you're like, shall I pass in 1 or 2 or 7 parameters? Like you can decide, but here it looks like you're choosing it and it's giving you those different.
Yeah. So you have to choose it here, but then at the bottom of the fuzzy finder down, I don't know if I can get it down in this area. When I've moused over a node, you can see that there's a description of what the node is. And then it also gives you, this information is really important. It gives you what types of inputs and outputs that the node is looking for. So this one is taking in a transform and also a vector 3. So that can be really useful when you're trying to hook up 2 different nodes and you can see, okay, well, this node is spitting out a string. Then you want to, then you want to look for the next node that has a string input. So that way those 2 nodes fit together, kind of like puzzle pieces.
Yep. Gotcha. There was just a question I want to jump to while you're taking us through this, Taryn. Is there a date the course is going to be released from Rose Netka? Yeah, today. So Taryn is here joining us because we're going to be doing an early access by 2 days. It's not like a fully massive early access. By 2 days, we'll be doing a proper launch at the end of the week. But anyone who's watching this video right now, we'll give you a code. Oh, it looks like Tim's thrown in a code. If you guys want to get the special early coupon, as we like to do on our live cast to reward the folks who come and watch, we've got a code. So if you're interested, go check it out. You don't have to, of course. You can hang out with us and chat and watch. You don't have to go get the course. But
you don't have to, but the discount expires this weekend, so you might want to.
You're such a marketing guy, Tim. You know these things. I don't even think. It's like, I don't know, expiry. So, Taryn, there's a lot of multiply to add in there that when I see that, it feels clunky and messy. But is that Like, why do we have to I can't remember a time in doing something in C# where I've said a thing, multiply, multiply, add, quite like that. So what's going on there? Why do we have these kind of joining nodes? Why
Yeah,
do
so
we multiply?
this is player movement that we're doing. So all the multiply nodes are because we're multiplying by speed and then doing by delta time and then doing the normalize for player input as well, the different input axes. And when
Yep.
you're making a graph like this, it's it's not like I just come in and just like dump all the nodes in at once. Like we'll be chunking it out, and I think that will make it feel a lot less overwhelming. So I think for this graph, we probably started with the update node going to transform set position. So that's the main flow of this node, is going left to right from update to transform set position. And then whatever vector 3 that is being taken in by this node was probably at the beginning. And again, this is later on. This is sort of what it's going to look like later on in the course, was probably just these input axes here, which are being plugged into a vector 3. So it's, you're building everything incrementally. So it hopefully will make a lot more sense when you're actually in the course about why we need all these different nodes. And they're just math functions like multiply, add, a division, that sort of thing.
Yeah. You know what I do like about this, though, is I have no experience with visual scripting in Unity whatsoever, but I've made a few games. And so I look at this and I know exactly what's happening. Like I can see it all, like visually. I get
Yeah.
it. The only thing I
It
don't know, maybe this is a programming question, but on update event, that's a trigger, right? So that that starts this whole
Yeah.
piece of
Yeah.
code.
Yeah. So it's an event node. So
Right.
it'll go every frame. Yeah. So it's basically if you
Okay.
do know C#, we have update, start, awake, those types of things. And I get confused because I have to think C#, we call them awake, start. And then in visual
Right.
scripting, it's on update, on start. Yeah. So it basically is just, it'll start immediately as soon as I press play.
But so the get access raw stuff though is
Mhm.
not on any kind of event, but it is before the chain on that next
Yeah.
action, right?
Yeah, so the main flow here is that's going from update to transform set position, but then transform set position, we have to tell it what position we want to set it to. And so to arrive at the vector 3 that we need to plug into this transform set position node,
It
we have to do
goes
all this
right.
calculation over
Gotcha.
here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
I
was the
think
only thing that
visual.
was maybe a little confusing, but that
Yeah.
totally makes
This
sense.
is actually a pretty confusing like, or
It's a
a
good one
more
to show for that
advanced, I would
reason.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like that you can, like, there's a logic to it. There's, for some people it's this organization visually. Well, obviously, visual is good for visual people, but you can see here's a thing and that feeds into it and that feeds into it. So then it's a lot easier, I think, conceptually to see that, oh, it's taking in something or it's getting something or it's being fed something. Then when you've got code, sometimes it's misleading or it's hard to know. There's some parentheses and things are in the parentheses, but where the heck did they come from and what are
Yeah.
they and what do they mean? So this for me, there was a question as well about if we already know C# and comfortable with it, is there a benefit learning visual scripting? My quick answer, and Taryn, it'd be good to get your longer answer or your more educated answer. My quick answer is every time I learn a different way of programming, I get much, much stronger with the foundations of programming. When I go to a different language or a different engine, I'm like, oh, that's that thing. Oh, we do it that way over here. And it really cements my understanding of whichever I'm choosing as my primary language or primary engine, because I've had other ways of conceptually considering it. It helps me understand better. So
Yeah.
have you found a similar thing?
Definitely, 100%. It's a whole new way of, I shouldn't say a whole new way because there are similarities between visual scripting and C# coding, but it is quite a novel way of approaching Unity, and it really has helped me feel more, I guess, more, I was already comfortable working in Unity, but it has really
Yeah.
cemented my knowledge for sure. And I do tend to be a more visual person as well. So this has felt really natural to me doing,
Yeah.
doing the groups like this. These are groups here. So we have the player movement group and then the color change group. So you can sort of divide them up, sort of like you would do for methods in C#.
Yeah.
But you can give you can change the color of the group and that sort of thing as well. So
Can you
as a
show us
visual,
one of those? sorry to interrupt. Can you show us
Yeah.
one of those nodes that has tons of stuff coming and going? Because that's different down the bottom. Because your top graph has
Yeah.
got
Oh, this one
in, one
here.
out. But there, where you've got, I can't quite read it. Maybe you can zoom in a little bit. Is it cooldown that it says?
Yeah,
Yeah,
cooldown.
cooldown. That's
Yeah.
got a lot going on. Like, do you get to the point where you've got thousands of node, or what are they called? The points that come and go. The node is ports. Do you
Yeah.
have thousands of ports? Does it get super complex and confusing, or is it just no? You look, the arrows mean a thing, and the blue ports mean a thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. So the arrows always mean the same thing, which is the flow. So what you want to have happen next, essentially after this node, and then the other ports are color coded. A lot of them are color coded. Like in this case, the blue is a float, and the purple is a Boolean. So that's a nice little addition to visual scripting.
Okay, yeah.
And then the trick with these big nodes is that you don't need to have everything connected. And I think that's really important to emphasize for somebody who's first getting into visual scripting. You don't have to look at this node and think, well, I have to connect every single one of these ports. It will still work without everything connected. They're just there for you as sort of as options, essentially.
I gotta say, looking at this, like one of the things I've struggled with learning new languages, especially in Unity with C#, is like if I find something like a cooldown or something like a timer, I don't. I know what I need to do. I need a timer, but I don't know all the other things that comes with that timer. And right here on this right side, you see ready, not ready, tick, completed, remain. Like, wow, that's awesome. I see it all right there. So anything I want to plug into, I can just plug into. And I never thought of myself as a visual person, but like seeing this, I'm like, wow, this is clicking way more than C# was in Unity.
Yeah, and it's really useful as well. Sorry, I just want to say one more thing, that there's also this graph inspector over on the left-hand side of the screen. So if you have a node selected, oftentimes you'll see information here that's helpful. So again, showing that the purple unscaled port is a Boolean, the blue duration port is a float, that sort of thing. So there's lots of information, lots of helpful information built in.
On my streams, we called them booleans, but people got mad at me.
Boolean.
Boolean.
If you're from down south, Boolean. Can you plug me in from Boolean? At the risk of sounding a little bit cheesy, this for me feels like I'm playing a game. For those of us who are into game development and into video games, it's kind of like, okay, there's a drop down, there's a thing, I connect it. It's like a little, a little puzzle, or there's, I guess, visual scripting in general feels a little bit more like video game playing than it feels like coding. So some people are like, oh, I don't want that. I want to have like typey. So it's a little bit of do what works for you, I think, is the bottom line in all this.
Yeah. I never thought of it like that, but I definitely agree with that.
Well, programming started by the constraints of the computer screen, right? It could only show text in the beginning when machines were new. So it's not that I don't want to get attacked by programmers here. I'm not saying programming is obsolete. It's absolutely not. It's going to be part of our...
Tim, are you saying programming is obsolete? Is that what you're saying? Are you saying programmers are bad?
I'm just saying that, like, it's really cool to see kind of the iPhone philosophy of like, let's not just put Windows on a phone. Let's redesign a phone for a touchscreen. They're kind of using the same philosophy for visual scripting. And I know Unreal's had it a long time with their stuff, but it's really cool to see a lot of stuff like this that's more accessible to a lot of different types of people. That where maybe that, staring at C#, a wall of text, it just doesn't compute, Yeah.
It's cool as well. I think there's people out there who ask, where should I start? And if they're interested in visual scripting, usually the answer is, well, go to Unreal, because Blueprint is amazing. But I think Unity visual scripting is now at the point where it rivals Unreal. So if you're more interested in Unity as an engine and you're more interested in visual scripting, I think finally there's a really clean, viable way to go about doing that. Taryn, been a couple of questions around this, but question from Gargoyd. Can custom labels, icons, comments be added to the nodes?
That is a good question. Not that I know of. I'm thinking custom labels. Not that I know of. The only thing that I know about that can be added is doing the groups, as I've showed you. So when you have a group of nodes, you can sort of click and drag your mouse and then label them that way and change the color and that sort of thing. So that's not something, it's not a feature that I'm aware of, if it does exist.
And a question I've got, just in terms of the cleanliness or the quickness. So we're often adding new variables. So it's like, oh, I just need a variable to store this. I need to store the score. What's the process? Can you just take us through that? It's like, oh, I need a variable to store the score.
Yep.
How easy or challenging is that to do? How quick? Maybe you can just show us quickly the
Yeah.
workflow for that.
Yeah. So over on the left-hand side of the screen, so this is the graph inspector. It's sort of like
Yep.
the normal Unity inspector, but it's for graphs. And there are these different tabs here, which are different types of variables. So they're visual scripting specific variable types, which sound they sound a lot more complicated than they are. There's graph, object, scene, app, and saved. Graph variables are specific to this one graph. So things like, I think I have, the min and max speed. This is of the player. Those are graph variables because only this one graph is going to need to access those variables. And this is the player controller graph.
Right.
However, something that's I really like in visual scripting, this is sort of like creating a public variable in C# is a scene variable, which means it's a variable that can be accessed by any graph on any game object throughout the scene. So it's really useful for things like player score, where you might want to have a couple of different objects access it, or a health pool or something like that. So to create a variable, you would just click on the tab that you want. So we're going to make a scene variable, and then you just type in the name. So I'll just say score, and then you can choose the type. So let's just choose, you can see them all here. This is a 2D game, so it defaults to vector 2, but there's also vector 3 and a bunch of other types. So we'll make it, I don't know, like an integer, I guess. And then you can initialize it at something if you want, or if you're just going to increment it during gameplay, you can just leave it as is. And then I'm just going to go over more. Then you can just drag and drop it onto the graph like that. And so this is now a reference to this variable. So if you want to plug this in to another node, you can do that. And what you can also do is change a variable's value with a set. So this is the get variable. So getters and setters. You can also set a variable's value. So I'm going to go and grab a set variable node, and I want to choose the correct node for the correct variable type. So this is a scene variable. So I'm going to select the set scene variable. And so then I could use this node to change the value of that
score. Can you scroll in just a little bit for us, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So getters and setters, essentially. This is the get, and this is the set.
And then you would drag the variable into the set.
So if you wanted to assign, so you would have to choose the variable from this drop down here. And then if you want to give it a different value, you could do that with this. Just let me check. Yeah, with this input port here. And then you would have to activate. So right now, so right now I have this variable selected in the graph, and you can see over on the left-hand side of the screen, it says in the graph inspector, node is never entered. So this node, because it has nothing connected to its input control port, it's never actually being called. It's like having a method. I'm sure we've all been there where we've written a method and then never called it in a script and then been like, why isn't this working? So it's the same sort of thing. You need to make sure that you have it actually connected via the control port.
Cool. And if I go in and I create other graphs in the same scene, in that tab to the left, all of my scene variables are still going to be there?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Cool. So it's, I can see there's some areas that, like in C#, like, variable equals job done. Like it's very, very quick. One little line, boom, got it. And I can see there's a little bit more here to do with setup. But then once you've got that, there's a flexibility and obviously the visuality to doing this. So yeah, it's interesting from the point of view of learning a different technique. I can see there's enough learning in there for people. You can't just jump in and have a play with it and get it instantly. You have to put some thought into what are these new sorts of variables and how do things connect. So,
yeah, this has more of like a sandboxy feel too. Like when you're programming, you really can't just sit down at a blank page and not know a programming language and write out a program. You can't. You need some other kind of source. You need to understand the variables, you understand how they connect and Stack Overflow back and forth and docs and all that stuff. With this, I really feel like even though I don't know any of the syntax, I could sit down and press a bunch of buttons and kind of intuit how some stuff works. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I could figure it out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. There is, I think, more opportunity for figuring things out. Especially if you're in the fuzzy finder here, all of the different nodes are, some of these categories are a little bit obtuse, I think, but
Mm.
the nodes are organized into different categories. So like, oh, if you wanted to go and look for an event node, you could click the event category and you could just keep driving down into these different categories. So under physics is where you'll find the collision nodes, for example. So you can do a lot of exploration in here if you just want to like look at,
Yeah.
okay, what's under nulls or what's in the math library, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because when we're in our IDE, when we're typing in our code, the autocomplete or the
Mhm.
IntelliSense is super useful,
Mhm.
but it's limited to a certain. It's not everything in Unity. It's not everything in our
Yeah.
code. But here it looks like it's everything. So if you get there and say, okay, it's on something, it's going to give you all the ons available to you. Or if it's
Mhm.
it's part of your. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of similarity there. That there's autocomplete advantage that you get, but here it's right there, and it
Yeah.
seems pretty diverse.
Yep. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. For sure.
cool.
So
A
in
couple
the
of questions about.
course,
Oh,
sorry, one
sorry.
last question here. In the course, you actually walk through from scratch how to create a new project and add visual scripting to it and get this up and running.
Yep, that's right. That's what we do at the course. Yep.
Cool.
Awesome. Um, and a couple of questions about: is there a magic button that allows you to say, "Here's my graph"? Like, click a button and it'll turn it into C sharp, and I can then go
Oh,
inspect the C sharp, or,
I wish
or
there was.
right?
No,
Okay,
no, there isn't. Like that would be a really cool feature, but no, no, there isn't that.
right.
But you don't need that,
Okay,
right?
cool.
Because it's standalone by itself. It does what it needs to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
there's. Sorry, you.
no, 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 you go ahead.
I was going to say, from my point of view, there's a curiosity. It's like, okay, what
Yeah.
have I just done? What does this relate to? And either to link to your existing knowledge or to educate you on, okay, I want to do bip, bip, bip. Oh, that's how we'd write it in C sharp. But that would, yeah,
It'd
that
probably be
sounds pretty
bad code.
complex to do that.
Like,
It is
Yeah.
honestly an interesting exercise that I've done myself, though. It feels like it feels like language translation where, you know, I've had a script and then I've thought sometimes when I've been prototyping, I've started with the script and then had to sort of translate it into visual scripting. And that's been, I'm a language person, so I found that really, really interesting. And again, it has really helped cement my knowledge of how to do things in Unity.
Have you, Taryn? I know the projects we make in the course aren't gigantic, so we
Hmm.
probably aren't hitting any optimization issues just yet, or any sort of performance issues. But from your research into Unity visual scripting, are there any gotchas? Are there any like, oh, this is way less efficient? Um,
No, how I wouldn't say that there's anything more than you would encounter in traditional C sharp programming. However, that the subgraph super unit thing that I had pointed out earlier in this chat, that was designed for optimization purposes. So that way you can reuse logic over and over again without having to cut and paste or do traditional sort of optimization that we would do with coding. But no, not, I mean, I expect when you get really, really, and I've seen projects that are like huge, huge, huge graphs, there might be some stuttering. Like when you play the game, let me see here if I can get this to go.
there's definitely been huge Steam games that have been launched with nothing but visual scripting too, like
Oh, I
Bolt
don't think I have.
and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's not working now because I have to trigger an actual movement for this to work, but there is visually some things that happen while you're in gameplay here. You'll see like the little arrows will run across the different flows here as well. And so
oh, I see.
I
Yep.
mean, performance wise, if you had like a giant graph, you're probably going to run into some issues there, but nothing major, especially if you're using subgraphs, which is something that I'll be tackling in one section of the course.
Yeah, so it shows you when you in the Unity animator, it shows you the animation, like triggering. If you're looping between a particular animation, there's a visual expression of that. So it's the same when you click play, your graph lights up with this is feeding into this and this is happening and blinking and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you can organize your windows, which I don't have right now, so that you can see. You can have your graph window open at all times, and so you can actually see like when this trigger node when this collision node gets triggered, then a little like animation will happen that'll show that it's now setting the sprite renderer color.
Yep, cool.
Plus, what did you call them? Graph super units?
Mm-hmm.
Who wouldn't want a graph super unit in their game? That sounds awesome.
That's an upgrade. You have to pay for DLC to get the super units. It's in the expansion pack. Awesome. So if anyone watching at the moment's got any questions, please do throw them our way. Throw them at Taryn. Ask her anything at all that you want to ask her. Tim has put up the link to the course, which is for anyone watching this video live or within the next week or so. We've got a coupon that you guys can jump into and access. I've seen a few comments from lifetime members saying, yeah, lifetime membership. You lifetime members get the course absolutely included without any extra going off to the credit card. So that's pretty cool for lifetime members. And if you're not a lifetime member, well, maybe in a year's time, we'll do another lifetime member opportunity. Rick, you're starting to sound like you work for EA. Well, goodness me. Isn't that the best compliment I've received all day long, Wolfie? I'm not sure how you intended that. Side note, I did technically actually used to work for EA. Because I work for PopCap. PopCap is owned by EA, and bada bing, bada boom. So, DLC. What are your thoughts
came
on
from the dark side?
The dark side, yeah. It took me a while to understand why you were saying EA, because I'd made a comment about DLC, so I understand. So question, is there support for the new input system, Taryn? The new input system that we all love to hate. We love it because it's cool, but we hate it because it means when we're teaching it, we have to teach so many more complex things just to get a thing moving.
Yep. Yes, there is support for the new input system. I had originally had this prototype, the first project, using the new input system. However, this being an introductory course, started to get a little bit complicated with a bunch of different nodes. So for the first few sections of the course, the first 3 sections of the course, we'll be using the older input system. And then we might get to the newer input system later on because it is a lot more complicated. But there is support built in for it.
Yeah.
I seen a question earlier where someone was asking about if they knew Bolt, if they took a Bolt course, do they need to take this new visual scripting course, or is it pretty similar to how Bolt used to work?
Yeah, it's similar. Some of the nodes, though, have different names, so it can be a little bit confusing. Like I mentioned, I believe it's called super units in Bolt and then subgraphs in visual scripting. Some of the ways that the namespaces work, or what I think of as namespaces from coding work, is different between Bolt and visual scripting. So I do think it's definitely worth taking this course because there are enough differences, but it will give you sort of a leg up for sure if you come into this course already with some familiarity with Bolt.
Cool.
Yeah.
Jeremy asks, Bolt had the ability to use human readable, friendly, or real API names for nodes. Is this still true for Unity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what they've done in visual scripting, they used to in Bolt have the option to use either programmer or, as you said, human readable names, and they've defaulted to mostly human readable. But as far as I can tell, it's sort of like a hybrid between programmer and the human readable names in Bolt used to be very very straightforward and almost like not descriptive enough about what the node was actually being used for. So this seems to be more of a sort of hybrid, and you don't have the option anymore, as you used to in the project settings, to change how you want those names to be displayed. It's now built in.
Side note, Jeremy's question would have, if you can put that back on, Tim, Jeremy's question would have broken the system because of his bracketing on the QSTN. So that wouldn't have happened in visual scripting. We wouldn't have had that problem.
He used single quotes though.
He's single quotes, but he's got different. He's got a square bracket and a curly brace. Anyway.
No semicolon at the end.
And
you didn't end your line.
Exactly.
We would have kept reading the question forever.
Still waiting. Yeah, awesome. Cool. So, Taryn, is there anything that you found with visual scripting that you've thought, oh, this doesn't make, I'm confused. This is crazy. This is terrible. I wish it was done a different way. What's if someone works through the course, if someone jumps in and says, oh, I'll give this visual scripting a go, at what point are they going to say, Taryn, are they going to hit that issue, or is there none?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Also a loaded question. I would say like there's definitely a mental hurdle to get over. So the first time that we do the player movement, so this is the part of the graph that I was showing you earlier. The first time you do the transform set position, and then have all of this different data feeding into the node, can feel a little bit overwhelming. But like I said, I've tried to chunk it up so that I'm never saying like, okay, add these 8 nodes all at once. I tried to break it down to show how all of these things build on one another. So you can sort of think of these nodes as building blocks. So I wouldn't say that there's anything crazy. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there are a couple things like using namespaces, which is it's really simple in coding where you can just, add as many as you want using whatever at the top of the script. And then here, you have to go in and access, like you have to go and add in different assemblies and that sort of thing. It sounds more complicated than it is. And I show you how to do it in the course, but, it can take, it's something different. You have to sort of wrap your head around it, but I don't think there's anything that should be too like earth-shattering when it comes to visual scripting. It's the same logic as C# programming. It's just represented in a different way, essentially.
Gotcha. Question from Area 50. I'm going to correct a spelling here. So what is the difference between bold and visual scripting? Is bolt with a T? So in case you're wondering why we keep talking about bolt, B-O-L-T, and visual scripting. Taryn, just a quick explanation on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yeah, and it is bolt with a T. Hopefully I'm saying it right in my Canadian accent. Doesn't sound weird or something.
Canadians there. Yeah. All the Americans are like, what's she saying?
Yeah, bolt. I know. Now I'm gonna blush. I'm so self-conscious about it. Yeah, so bolt it used to be a separate package that you had to download from the package manager and install. And after version 2021, Unity 2021, you can still actually download and install bolt if you want, but it's outdated, so don't do it. Visual scripting is now automatically integrated into the Unity editor after version 2021 of Unity. So you don't need to do anything with package management and that sort of thing anymore. You can just open up a blank project and then start building a graph right away. So it's a lot easier to use.
Yep. Cool.
And it's no longer called Bolt. It's just called Unity Visual Scripting.
Yeah. I think when we first started working on the course, it was Bolt. But then at some point they're like, no, don't call it. Shh, that's a secret. It's that.
Yeah. Well, colloquially, it is still called Bolt. On a lot of like different developers will call it that. So I don't there's definitely nothing wrong with referring it to it as that. It's just, just be aware that you don't actually have to go and download a different package and install it.
It was a Unity asset that got acquired by Unity, right?
Yeah.
Like they bought it. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. A question, we've already answered this, but just briefly again, can you mix up coding and visual scripting in the same project?
Yeah, you definitely can. You can even trigger, different graphs and things to start working from scripts. I don't know. It's not something that we've tackled in this course, and I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think, and this just might be from my personal perspective. Like, I feel like I would probably want to stick with either visual scripting or coding per project, unless it's like a really big project with a bunch of moving parts.
I could see if I found code from somewhere else or code I'd written before. I'll just go grab that script and put it in there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Also teams, like somebody's working on logic and somebody's working on back-end multiplayer programming.
Yeah.
Imagine the arguments on that team. It's like, I've written some stuff. It's like, oh man, just drag the nodes. Oh, you visual scripting guys, you don't know what you're doing. That's not proper programming. Oh, you coders, you don't. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can use both for sure.
Can you call a script from Unity Visual Scripting? at all?
You can. I haven't done it thus far, but I know you can access a script that's on a game object through a node. So it's something you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
A question from Santeri. Good question. Why should I learn visual scripting if typing comes naturally to begin with?
Well,
Semicolon.
yeah,
Double
like I
quotes.
mean, it's visual scripting, you're definitely going to probably prefer one or the other. So it's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be everyone's first preference when it comes to game development in Unity. But as somebody who learned C# programming before visual scripting, I can't emphasize enough how much it has helped cement my knowledge of working with the different classes and components and that sort of thing. Again, just if you are a more visual learner, a visual person, I think that this is probably a more optimal way of approaching game development in Unity, at least as a beginner. And I just think, like, personally, once you've coded so much in Unity, like if you're looking for something different to try, if you want to like spice things up a little bit, sometimes I feel like I'm just sort of like doing the same thing over and over again when I'm creating scripts. So I think this is like a really
Yeah.
excellent opportunity to just have fun and do something different.
That's a really good point, Taryn. I find myself when I'm working on a project, I look and I say, okay, I need to type these things. It might be just something as simple as, accessing something and doing something and connecting something. I know exactly how to do it, but it's going to be a minute of typing. And I'll look at it and go, I don't want to do that minute of typing because it's like, I've already done
Yeah.
this, 5, 10, 20 other times in my project. And it's not the exact same code, so I can't just link it and
Yeah.
be clever with it. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it adds a little bit of freshness to your programming journey, particularly if you've hit a little bit of that lull of I'm kind of not really feeling like I'm improving or progressing. I think
Yeah.
just changing it up. Very similar to the philosophy if you're going to the gym and working out. If you do the same exercise every single time, your
Mhm.
body doesn't adapt. You're not keeping your brain fresh and excited. But if you do some other sort of movement or some other sort of workout, then it does keep you fit. Hurrah, CrossFit. That's their whole philosophy. You're mixing it up all the time. So
Yeah.
I think it's similar with this. If you're not into it, don't do it. Like, don't come and do the course if you're looking at it saying, I don't want to do that stuff. That looks dumb. Great, don't do it. But if you're looking to, as Taryn's saying, cement what you know and looking to keep things fresh, I think it's great. I think
Yep.
it's really, really useful. Excellent question and excellent answers. Thank you. What else we got from a question point of view? There's great questions today. I love it. I think when we do technical conversations, people are like, "Oh, I want to know more about this." When we talk more sort of philosophical, then I don't know, a different kind of interest. Okay, Tim, here you go. Here's a question for you from Mike. How can I purchase the course from Russia?
You should be able to, as far as I know. If you don't, it's not on our end. We have not
Yeah, if you go to
restricted any countries whatsoever.
If you go to the link that Tim has given you, it's on the GameDev.tv website. So, Mike, if you can go to GameDev.tv, then you can. Well, we don't know. We don't control what the governments are doing at the moment. If there's any sort of Russia bans or blocks, we do apologize, but that's nothing that we.
Yeah, if it is, it's not on our end because we think everybody should be able to learn.
Absolutely. This is a question that's probably for Taryn. I'm going to assume it's for Taryn. What part of Canada are you in?
Well, I am in Ontario, so I'm about an hour and a half south of Toronto in Ontario.
Nice.
And Ontario is a province in Canada, if you're not aware, anyone out there.
Province. Tell us more about the parliamentary system in Canada.
No.
Yeah. Are you pro Justin or anti? No. Okay, don't go down that path. Yes. Well, he's handsome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seth was asked, would you agree that visual scripting is a fast way for testing game ideas?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, I would think that this would be really good for designers, like somebody who wants to come in and get something sort of down quickly. You do need to have some familiarity. Like, you definitely can't come in like completely like never been in Unity ever before in your life and know exactly what to type in. But once you do get sort of that basic understanding of visual scripting under your belt, which should really get like after, a few lectures, even you'll be a lot more familiar with the interface, then yeah, I do think that this is really a really optimal environment for testing and prototyping.
Yeah,
I would say so
awesome.
too. I think Construct 3, not to promo the engine here, but it's one of my favorite prototyping tools because it's very quick and trigger based and visual.
Yeah. And you know what? There is a lot of visual. Tim, you and I created our quick Construct 3 course, and just the amount of like drag, put it here, do that, reorder it. It's even more hybridy in a way. Like you're not typing, but it does feel very codey in Construct
Yeah.
3, but also very visual. And then I've been doing a lot of Scratch lately as well, teaching the young folks out there.
Yeah.
And so it's also visual. But the thing that I keep coming back to is every time that I personally go into a different engine or different language, I have these aha moments about, oh, and for me, Scratch does events really well. It's so clear, like broadcasting a message, and then this thing, here's the message, and it does something. And for me in Unity, for the longest time, events and messages and broadcasts were always kind of like, oh, how does it hook up? It doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. But then going into Scratch, and it's so easy to understand, and then I can apply that back to Unity. And, oh, okay, that conceptual block that I had has been removed, and now it's just the syntax differences. So I really encourage anyone out there who's maybe a year or two into their programming journey, not to say must stick with the same language and get really good at that, but to deliberately go out there and sample some other things, play around with it, get that freshness of discovery, which puts a little bit of pep in your step as well, I think. And then to allow that to cement what you know, and then go back to your primary engine and primary language with a little bit more, I think, a little bit more enthusiasm perhaps, but a little bit more structure.
Yeah, for sure. Like this using visual scripting, it feels like when I started learning JavaScript, and I did that sort of as a complement to learning C#. And so there are a lot of similarities between C# and JavaScript. And then after I'd spent some time with JavaScript, I was able to come back to C# and feel, I don't know, sort of like look at it with fresh eyes and feel more comfortable with some of the more static components of it. And that's sort of how I feel after tackling visual scripting as well. Coming back to C#, I feel like, oh yeah, like I know, I'm going to try. I've even been a little more bold with the types of coding patterns that I've been experimenting with, just because visual scripting has given me that additional insight.
Yeah.
When I was messing around with C#, I was like, why is everything yelling at me all the time?
Yeah.
And it's so strict. And then you realize that when you program in JavaScript for a couple of years, that it just lets you get away with everything and doesn't tell you when anything's wrong. And you're like, oh my God,
That
I would
stresses
much
me
rather
out.
yell at me
Yeah.
than let me add 1 + 1 and it equals 1 1.
I also find that Unity is a little bit more forgiving than Unreal. My experience with Unreal is if you look at it wrong, it's just like it explodes. But Unity is a little bit more, well, we'll let you get away with that, but your game's going to not work super well, or you'll find this after playtesting an hour or two into it. But Unreal seems a bit more like, you must do it exactly the way we want. Just my experience. There was another question along those lines, similar sort of theme of, learning one thing, is it good for another thing? Will Unreal Blueprint knowledge be translatable to Unity visual scripting, or will it cause some confusion? So, Taryn, I'm not sure if you've played around with Blueprint enough to answer that.
I haven't, but I have some familiarity with the Blueprint system, and it's definitely very, I should say very similar, but it's definitely similar to Unity's visual scripting system. You have the nodes and you have the ports, although I believe they call them something different in Blueprints, and the different connections between them. So I think I can't speak specifically because I'm a Unity girl. I'm not an Unreal girl. But definitely like the sort of like overall framework is going to be very similar. So I think that if you came to this course, to the Unity visual scripting course, with some Unreal Blueprint knowledge in your back pocket, then that would be really helpful.
Yeah. And, it's, I find the hardest thing are the concepts. And once you understand the concepts, when you think, okay, well, how do I manage all of these different things? Oh, I need an array to do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then that's the hard part of programming. The easy part is saying, well, what's the syntax for an array? How do I hook it up? So if you've
Yep.
already got that blueprint knowledge of, okay, I need that, feeding into this, organize it that way, that's separate to this over there, I think then you're going to have a big advantage. And learning Unity visual scripting is really just going to be, okay, show me the layout, the syntax,
Mhm.
what are the nodes, what are the exceptions for this particular engine.
That's what I found actually really frustrating is like I had built several dozen games and I come to Unity to try and learn it. I know all of these things, but I can't get these ideas out of my head because I don't know the syntax for
Mhm.
the code and the words. And seeing what Taryn pulled up, it was like, oh, like it's all there. It's all just listed out, and I could just click through stuff and try stuff. It seemed much more appealing to me, um, coming from a background of understanding what all those things are
Mhm.
and not having to learn the syntax basically.
Yep. Question from EJ Matter. If I learn visual scripting coding from your course and practice what is the likely mood of being hired as a programmer? Would I still need a degree? Okay, let me have a kick at this one, and then you guys can give your thoughts. If you're good at doing something, then companies will be interested in you. If you can solve a problem, if you can get something done, I would say visual scripting is more of an indie hobbyist approach. If you turn up for a job interview and say, I don't know how to do any C sharp, but I know how to do visual scripting, that'd be fantastic if they use Unity and if they if you're in a role where visual scripting is suitable. Maybe you're working as some sort of technical designer or level designer or what have you. As a designer, I think having visual scripting, fantastic. If you want to be a gameplay programmer, then they're probably going to say, well, look, we want to see that you can type the things in there, and visual scripting isn't going to be as strong. But these things take time. So if you get good with visual scripting, and then it's pretty easy to pick up, I think, the actual, the C sharp side of
Mhm.
things. That will help out. In terms of degrees, we do not need a degree to prove your value to an organization. A degree just gives you a little bit of a head start. So a lot of organizations will say we prefer a degree, but that doesn't mean it needs to stop you or block you. If you are just as awesome as the person with the degree, then you will be able to open doors if you know how to open doors. So, yep. Hopefully that answers that question. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on that.
I don't think I don't think a hiring manager is going to consider visual scripting programming quite yet. I think in 10 years that could be very, very different, right?
Mhm.
But right now, I think there's still programming and then there's visual scripting, and they keep them
Yeah.
very separately. So yeah,
What a lot
similar to
of a
what
lot
Rick
of
said.
designer roles ask for you to have scripting ability. They won't
Right.
say programming ability. So that's why I
Yeah.
make the distinction between a designer who's in the engine making
Right.
things happen versus a programmer. A programmer has to be able to
Right.
program. Yeah.
And generally on AAA teams, like you'll have programmers that build the I don't know, the AI system, and then you have designers that will script the behaviors for the actual
Mhm.
enemies using the system that the programmers built, and it's like a collaboration back and forth. So that stuff comes in handy, especially if you're not like specialized in programming. Understanding those concepts goes a long way to communicating with a programmer, right? Just like understanding some art fundamentals can go a long way communicating with artists. So it's definitely worth it. But like I agree with what Rick said about the job part. I don't think degree is necessary. I just think you need to be good at what you good at stuff and have a
Mhm.
portfolio.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
I agree with all that.
let's see. There was a question here that was strung a few together. If I can find it. So here we go. From Ellis, I got several questions about visual scripting in general and advice. Can you do algorithms like BFS pathfinding, for example, in visual scripting? I can't. I can't. I will send the rest in another message. Okay, run out of room in that message, and then is there a follow up? If you want to have a stab at that one, does that make sense? That question, Taryn.
So
Can you do
algorithm,
algorithms?
you can
Uh,
do basically everything that you can do in C sharp and visual scripting. Like you have access to the full math library and everything. It will be it won't be done the exact same way as you would do in C#, but all of the classes and components and everything that are built into C# are also in visual scripting. They might not be in there right in a fresh project. Like I mentioned that the nodes are organized into different assemblies. So sometimes you do have to go in and find like a specific. So for example, the Text Mesh Pro namespace, you'd have to load in separately. So depending on what you're trying to do, you might have to do a little bit of setting up, but everything can be done in visual scripting.
Yep. Cool. And then the second part of that was to do with Unreal. And if I want to try Unreal next, do you recommend me try visual scripting on it or not? You got a couple of different courses. So honestly, if you are interested in visual scripting and you're interested in playing around with Unreal, then Blueprint, we do have a couple of Blueprint courses. The thing, let me talk just briefly. Whoop, I don't know if you guys agree, getting excited, whacking the microphone. I don't know if you guys agree with this, but Taryn, question, what version of Unity are you using? The latest and greatest, right? Pretty much?
Yeah, 2022.1.
2022.1. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's pretty latest and greatest. So you're going to get the latest looking, latest up to date, the extra couple of bells and whistles. So which is really good. We try to have our courses as up to date as possible with the engine. The difference between Unity 2022 and Unity 2019 is not that much. If you're learning from a course that's created in 2019, in Unity, anything that's after 2018.3, if I remember correctly, which is when they first started with nested prefabs, that's significant. That's really, really important. If there's a course that's before that, it's going to be out of date and you're going to be learning some things and a bit confused. But they're all pretty much the same. It's the same with, dare I say it, Unreal Engine 4 and Unreal Engine 5. If you're looking to make your game and launch your game, Unreal Engine 5 is going to have some really good advantages for you in the way it does things. But if you're learning from a tutorial series, Unreal Engine 4 and 5 are nearly identical in terms of learning. The things that you can do, the techniques you're learning, the code you're going through. Blueprint is pretty much the same in 4 and 5. There's just a little bit of user interface difference, and it's the same with Unity. So I don't stress out there if you see a course that's a year or so out of date. That's still going to be just fine. If it's 2 or 3 years or 4 years out of date, then it's probably not the best. Which is why we always try to have our courses within that 2-year window. But even for us, if it's a Unity 2019, it's going to be just fine. So, Construct 2 and 3, would you say the same thing, Tim, or is Construct 3 a big step up?
Construct 3 is completely in browser. Construct 2 is an actual application you run on your computer. So that alone is huge because you can push straight to web, but it also works on all devices, tablets, Chromebooks, MacBooks, everything. And it's a lot more powerful. It wasn't at the beginning, but it is now. It's significantly different.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say the Unreal, the difference Unreal 4 and 5 is Unreal had an epic marketing department. You see what it did there?
That's just it. That's just it. I mean, if you've got a choice, learn in a course that's teaching 5, not 4. But if you're learning in 4, you're not going to learn anything wrong. You're not going to learn anything that's outdated. So, Taryn, just some questions about you in general. Like, are you making games? Are you an indie game developer, hobbyist? Are you working on something? Are you love teaching and you're more about teaching the staff? Are you just super busy with other things?
Yeah, well, yes, I'm always busy. I also have 2 little kids, so they keep me busy. So I really like teaching, so I've been enjoying doing that. And I guess I would consider myself an indie game developer. Although most of my professional work has been not so much games, but simulations. So I've built some, again, using Unity, using everything that you would use to make a game. It's just technically a simulation, not a game, for universities. So I've done some work that way. That's sort of where my head is at right now. I was in grad school for a really long time, and so I've always sort of had an affinity for working with or at a university. But then I've also made a few little indie games as well. Nothing huge, but a couple of them.
Yep. Yeah, cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. Let's take last one or two questions. We started on time. We might finish on time. This might be one of our best performances ever, I think, Taryn. I think there's a
You're
definite
welcome.
correlation between you being here and us being less crap. I think I'm starting to make that connection. Maybe we should have you on our live cast every week.
Whenever it's just you and I, Rick, it goes bad.
Nonsense. It's just nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. People are like, what are these idiots talking about? But today it's been,
they're arguing over terms again.
Oh yeah, that live cast where we had a good 20 minutes talking about what is a sandbox game, what's the genre.
Back and forth.
That's not a sandbox. This is a sandbox, and people in the chat are like, okay, I think we can probably move on now. Okay, here's a question. Here you go, Taryn. We'll see what you reckon about this one. This is from R4GE Rage 95. How long would it take to learn game development for an experienced developer without experience in game development by considering only free time? Well, goodness me, there's a lot of flexibility in free time in that terminology. What do you reckon?
So how long it would take to learn game development in only your free time? Is that I'm
if
assuming?
You're already an experienced developer?
Game development and free
well,
time.
depends. Yeah, so it depends like what kind of a developer you are. So I'm assuming this is somebody who is not currently a game developer, maybe like a web developer or something, is coming to game development. I mean, if you have any development knowledge, it's really going to put you ahead of the game. So whatever language you're coming to this with, I'm sure, I mean, an object-oriented programming language would be the best, I think, for jumping into Unity. But yeah, you can make a lot of progress just in your free time and using like courses like this or free resources, that sort of thing. I don't know if I can put like a set amount of time, because it sort of depends on like how productive you are and how much you can concentrate and how much free time you have. But I mean, I felt pretty comfortable as a game developer after 6 months or so, I would say. And I was working on it quite a bit. I think at that time I had probably more free time than the average person. So depends. But then I've seen people who, go at it like every day, study all day, every day, that sort of thing. And they get hired, after like 3 or 4 months, provided they have some experience already in the field. So I guess it sort of depends.
Taryn, did you have any development experience before starting learning game dev?
I had minimal experience in web development with like CSS, HTML, and then a little bit of JavaScript. And then from there, I pretty much jumped right into C# and then went back to JavaScript some and sort of went back and forth for a while.
I am still of the controversial opinion that modern game engines should use CSS for UI, because I think it would be amazing. But
I'm so done with CSS.
I thought you're on team game development, Tim. Goodness
I
me.
am, but Construct 3 is an HTML5 game development tool. Listen, HTML5 game development is the best of both worlds.
Oh goodness. Construct 3 is the only way to go.
I'm totally done trying to center divs or whatever all that nonsense is with CSS. I'm done.
No, I think if you had the visual like editor of Unity, but then the like button UI power of CSS, so like highlights, animations, up, down, click, all that stuff.
That would be really nice. Cool. Yeah.
One last kind of sensible question here. Is there a chart that shows the main functions to see what commands nodes are available to help us get up to speed faster? I imagine that'd be a pretty big chart.
Yeah, there isn't a chart, like one central chart. However, there is the official Unity documentation for visual scripting. Unfortunately, it's not as comprehensive as the documentation for C#, which I wish it was. And I can see even over the course of me making this course, that documentation has been slowly getting bigger. So I'm hopeful that it will soon be much more comprehensive. But there is a pretty good overview on the official Unity website about like what a node is, like what the different ports are, that sort of thing. And a little tiny bit about like a little bit of player movement. It doesn't explain it in great detail, but it's a fairly good overview. But yeah, there are charts within that documentation, but nothing really central that shows you like every single type of node kind of thing, because there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different nodes that you can use.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Gary has confirmed that UI Toolkit uses a subset of CSS and XML. So there you go, Tim.
I might have
Unity's
to learn
one
Unity
step ahead
now.
of you. There's no reason
Between
for
visual
you to
scripting and
not be a
CSS.
Unity guy now.
Oh,
Take all
man.
that crazy Godot nonsense that you throw around.
Godot's
and
pretty cool too, though.
It is pretty
The
cool.
UI tools in Godot are pretty amazing. I have to check out UI Toolkit, though.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. I think that's, let me just hide this thing if I can find where to, there it is. I think it's good for today. Lots of excellent conversations. Thanks for all the great questions that have been asked. We've got one more time the link down there. The course is available from today onwards for those watching this video, and I think we'll do a proper available to everyone this Thursday. You can buy it on GameDev.tv. And at some point, we always get this question, at some point it'll be on Udemy as well, and you folks can check it out there. But the link that we're giving you is for our GameDev.tv site. And Taryn has spent months of blood, sweat, and tears working on some pretty cool little projects in Unity using visual scripting. And if you ask her nicely, she might continue to add some more projects in there as time goes on, and to add some more content to it. So, Taryn, thanks for joining us today. I genuinely say that you have increased the professionalism of our live cast by 2,000% today. Thank you for coming along with crisp answers and sensible comments, as opposed to our normal kind of nonsense that Tim and I go on about. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. So thank you.
I learned a
Wonderful.
lot. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we look forward to seeing you guys in our guys and gals in our visual scripting course. And if you have any questions at all, fire them all to Lucy at GameDev.tv. Not to this guy or that guy or that gal. Cool. So wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And we'll see you all next week at the same time of 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday.
On Tuesday. See you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.